"Do not mind Constance, your grace. She is only here to turn the pages." Mrs. Draycott said it brightly, over her shoulder, halfway across the morning room at Oakmoor, and went on arranging her younger daughter against the light of the south window as though she were setting out fruit. Piers, Duke of Oakmoor, had been on his feet for 4 minutes, and had already decided that the morning was going to be very long. There were 2 of them. He had been told there was one. The one he had been told about was 19 or thereabouts, gold-haired, in white muslin with blue ribbon, and so plainly frightened that he wanted to open a window for her. The other was older 5 or 6 and 20, in a gray stuff gown that had been turned at the cuffs, and she came in behind the harp carrying 2 shawls, a work-bag, a music case and her sister's gloves, and put them all down in the correct places without being told, and stood back against the bookshelves out of the light. "Miss Draycott," said Piers. Both of them looked up. "Sophie," said her mother instantly. "Sophie, my love, His Grace is speaking to you. This is Miss Sophie Draycott, your Grace. My other daughter is Constance." "How do you do?" said Piers to the bookshelves. "Your Grace." That was all he got. 2 words in a low voice, and the older one did not come forward, and her mother had already begun on the subject of the harp, which had been brought over in a cart on straw, and was a very great deal of trouble, and Sophie played divinely, and everybody said so. The Duke of Oakmoor had a year and a day left in which to be a man who did not know what he was looking at. Before it was out, he would injure her in public, in a way no private apology could reach, and he would learn what it had cost her only after she had stopped expecting anyone to put it right. Sophie played for 11 minutes. She played nervously and not badly and stopped twice, and the second time was because the 4th string went with a noise like a small gun, and she jumped and put her hands over her face. "Oh, Sophie," said Mrs. Draycott in the voice. Constance was already there. She had the spare gut out of the work-bag before anybody else had moved, and she had the pin loosened, and the old string off, and the new one hitched and drawn up and tuned, with her ear against the sound board, in the time it took her mother to finish being disappointed. Then she stepped back to the bookshelves. "Thank you, Con," said Sophie. "Play the slow one. It suits you better and you know it." "Constance," said Mrs. Draycott. "Yes, Mamma." Piers said to the bookshelves, "How long have you been able to do that?" "Since I was 14, your Grace." "Constance had a little instruction as a girl," said Mrs. Draycott, "but she has no ear at all, poor thing, and she gave it up entirely, and I have always said it was a mercy, for one performer in a family is quite enough." "I was asking the other lady," said Piers. Mrs. Draycott laughed. It was a well-made laugh, and it had clearly been used a great many times. "Constance will tell you the same thing herself. Constance, tell His Grace." And Constance Draycott looked at the Duke of Oakmoor across 9 feet of his own carpet, with her hands folded in front of her and her chin absolutely level, and said, "My mother has told you, your Grace. It would be a waste of the morning for me to tell you again." That was the first sentence he ever heard her say, and he thought about it for a year. What he did not yet see was what had actually been done to the woman standing at the back of his morning room with an armful of shawls, who had been standing at the back of rooms for 9 years, in the same 3 gowns, while every farthing that should have been hers went past her in muslin and blue ribbon. By the time he understood it, he would have said one sentence about her, aloud in a card room in front of 30 people who repeated it. And he would have to stand up in the same room a year later and say it again himself, word for word, before he could begin to take it back. But that was October, and then the following June. This was the 2nd of June, and Piers rang for the tea things and sat down and permitted Mrs. Draycott to be delightful at him for 40 minutes. He learned a great deal in those 40 minutes, most of it by accident. He learned that the late Mr. Draycott had died 9 years ago, that his widow had the house at Wilderley on a lease and something under £1,000 a year, and that this had been said to him 3 separate ways, each of which was intended to sound like more. He learned that Miss Sophie was to be brought out properly next year, and had had a drawing master and an Italian master and a dancing master, and that the harp had cost 80 guineas and had been bought, though we could ill afford it, your grace, but one must not stint a girl's advantages. He learned that Miss Constance did not go out much, and preferred to be at home, and was so useful, and had never wished to marry, and was quite the old maid of the family, and did not mind being teased about it, this last said with a bright glance at the bookshelves, which did not move. And he learned, because he had spent 6 years being circled by women with daughters, and had got rather good at it, that Mrs. Draycott had come to Oakmoor that morning to sell him something, and that she had brought a second daughter along the way. A man brings a second horse, not to be looked at, but because somebody has to hold the coats. He walked them to the carriage himself, which surprised his own butler. Sophie went down the steps first with her mother's hand under her arm. Constance came last, with the music case and the work-bag and the 2 shawls, and one of the shawls slid, and Piers put his hand out and caught it. She stopped. "Thank you, your grace." "Miss Draycott, the 4th string on a harp is the one that goes in June, is it not, when the room is warm?" Something moved at the corner of her mouth. It was gone at once. "It is, your grace, and the 2nd in February." "You carry the spare gut in your own work-bag." "I carry the spare gut in my own work-bag," said Constance Draycott, "because if I did not, the morning would end in tears, and I should be the one who had to sit up with her. That is the whole of my musical accomplishment, and I would take it kindly if you did not mention it in the carriage." Then she went down the steps with the shawls, and got in with her back to the horses. Piers stood on the top step, and watched the carriage the entire length of his own avenue, which was 3/4 of a mile. And his butler, who had been at Oakmoor 31 years, said afterwards in the servants' hall that he had never once seen his grace do such a thing in his life. Lady Winbourne came to dinner on the Thursday, and gave him the county's version over the fish. She was 72. She had stood godmother to him in the year '88. She had buried 2 husbands and a great many opinions, and she had announced in January to him, to her card table, and to the vicar, that the Duke of Oakmoor would be married before he was 40, or she would know the reason why. "Draycott," she said. "Yes, Wilderley. He was a pleasant, silly man who died of a chill he need not have had, and he left everything to her which was silly too. There is money. There is a lease and 800 a year and a great deal of appearance." Lady Winbourne took more sauce. "The 800 goes on the girl, every penny of it and a little more. Masters, gowns, the harp, a carriage they cannot keep, the whole apparatus, all pointed at one thing, which is a match." "And the elder?" "The elder," said his godmother, "has been keeping that house running since she was 17, and I have never once seen her in a gown I did not recognize from a previous year." Piers turned his glass. "Why does she not go?" "Go where, my dear? A gentleman's daughter with no fortune and no character has exactly one road, and it leads to somebody else's schoolroom at £40 a year, and her mother would call it a disgrace to the family, and would say so in every drawing-room in the county." Lady Winbourne looked at him over her spectacles. "And there is the other thing, which is the one that holds her, and I dare say you have not thought of it." Tell me. She loves her sister, said Lady Winborne, and that woman knows it. He saw the arithmetic for himself on Sunday, in Wilderley Church, from the Oakmoor pew. Miss Sophie Draycott had a new bonnet, a new spencer, and a gown he had not seen in 3 appearances. Miss Constance Draycott had a grey gown he had seen on the 2nd of June, and a straw bonnet that had been retrimmed in a color that did not match, and gloves that had been mended along the seam of the thumb in stitches so small that he only saw them because he was looking. He caught her on the road on the Wednesday following, with the parish basket over her arm, a mile from Wilderley in the heat. Miss Draycott. Your Grace. May I carry that? No, said Constance, and kept walking, and after 4 strides added, but you may walk beside it if you have nothing better to do, and I should be obliged if you would not stop, because if we are seen standing still it is a conversation, and if we are seen walking it is an accident. They walked. There were larks going up out of the barley on both sides, and the dust came up over her boots at every step, and Piers, who had been in his own carriage since April, discovered that he was enjoying himself extremely. I am going to ask you a rude question, he said. You will ask it whether I agree or not, so you may as well. Why do you not go? Constance Draycott walked about 30 yards before she answered. Because of my sister, she said. That is the whole of it, and it is not complicated, and I will not have it made into something noble. Sophie is 19. She has been dressed and paraded since she was 15, and she has no notion how to say no to anybody, and there is exactly one person in that house who tells her the truth. And if I go to a schoolroom in Yorkshire, my mother will make certain I never see her again, and she will do it in 4 letters and a change of address, and she has done it before. Done it before to whom? To a curate, said Constance. When I was 22, he asked. I was not told. She shifted the basket to the other arm. I found it out 3 years afterwards from his sister in a shop, and I came home and asked my mother, and she said, my dear, he had 140 a year. I saved you from a life of turning sheets. And there was a surgeon at Ludlow when I was 24. I was told about that one, because by then I had stopped being asked and had begun being informed. And you said nothing. I said a great deal. It went nowhere, because a woman with no money in her own hands is a person who says things. She looked straight ahead. You have never in your life had to say a thing to somebody who could simply not do it. You will not know what it does to your voice after 9 years. Piers did not answer that for a quarter of a mile. Miss Draycott, he said at last, what would you do if you had the money in your own hands tomorrow? And Constance Draycott stopped in the middle of the road, which she had told him not to do, and looked at him. I have not let myself answer that question since I was 21, she said. Do not make me start. It is a bad habit, and I have only just got clear of it. Lady Winborne gave a dinner on the 11th of July, 22 at table, and the Draycotts were asked because Lady Winborne was interested and had no shame about it. The subject came up over the 2nd course. There had been a subscription for the roof of Wilderley Church, and to help it along, 4 views of the church had been drawn, engraved, and sold at £1, and they had done extremely well and raised £19, and every one of them had underneath it, in copperplate, after a drawing by Miss S. Draycott. Charming things, said somebody. Quite charming, and the little one of the north porch with the U. Oh, said Sophie. Oh no, that was Constance. The table went on for a beat, and then did not. Sophie, my love, said Mrs. Draycott. They are all Constances, mamma, all 4. Sophie had gone scarlet to the hairline, and her voice was shaking, and she went on anyway. She drew them in February in the churchyard in the cold, and she did the porch 3 times because she was not satisfied, and I only carried the board. Sophie. I did say, said Sophie to the table at large, miserably. I did say at the time that they should have her name on them, and Mamma said it did not signify, and that S and C are much alike in copperplate, and I said it did signify, and then I did not say it again, and I have been ashamed since March. Mrs. Draycott laughed the well-made laugh. My younger daughter is a great deal too generous, she said. Constance did lend a hand with the outlines, of course. She has a neat way with a pencil. Madam, said Piers. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. It was that kind of table, and he was that kind of guest. I have the 4 of them in my library. I bought them in March for a guinea because I liked the porch. He put down his glass. There is a hand in that drawing that has looked at a building until it understood how it stands up. Nobody lends that. Miss Constance Draycott, if you will send me your terms, I should like the same view of the west front of this house, and I will pay for it as I pay a man who mends my roof, which is to say quarterly and without argument. There was a silence of the sort that gets talked about for a month. Thank you, Your Grace, said Constance from the far end in the low voice. 4 guineas, and I shall want a fortnight of dry weather. Done. Going home in the dark with the lamps swinging, Piers was aware that he had done something to that household at that table, and he had not the smallest notion, then, what it was going to cost the woman in the gray gown. The refusal came on the Monday, in Mrs. Draycott's hand, on hot-pressed paper. Her Grace's, her ladyship's Mrs. Draycott's compliments, and she was desolated, but Constance was so very much occupied with the house at present, and her health had never been strong, and she was sure his Grace would understand that a commission of that kind, however kindly meant, was not quite the thing for a young lady in their situation. Piers read it twice, and then went out and walked round the lake at a speed that his dogs found excessive. On the Wednesday the carrier brought a note the size of a playing card, unsealed, with 2 lines on it in a small, upright hand. I shall want a fortnight of dry weather. I can come Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 until 11, being the hours in which I am not required. C.D. She came the first Tuesday in August, on foot, 3½ miles, with a board under her arm and her boots white with dust, and she was set up on the gravel in front of the west front by 8:20, and did not look up for 2 hours. Piers watched her from the library window for 40 minutes on the first morning like a boy, and then gave it up as beneath him and went out and had a chair carried down and sat in it, at a decent distance, with a book he did not read. You are in my light, Your Grace. I am 11 feet away. You are a very large object and the sun is behind you. She did not look round. There, thank you. They talked over 8 mornings in the peculiar way people talk when one of them is working, in fragments, with long gaps and no politeness at all. He learned that she had read her way straight through her father's library between the ages of 12 and 17, and that the library had been sold in the year after he died, in one lot, to a bookseller at Shrewsbury, for £62, that she remembered the sum, and that she had walked into that shop 3 years later and found her father's own copy of Evelyn priced at 9 shillings, and had not had 9 shillings. He learned that she had done the Wilderley accounts since she was 17, and that she was the only person in that house who knew what anything cost. He learned that her health was excellent and always had been. My mother says it is delicate when she wants me at home, said Constance, and robust when there is a floor to be scrubbed. It is a very obliging constitution. And on the 4th morning he learned the other thing, and he learned it because he asked her whether she liked her sister. She put down the pencil for the first time in 8 mornings. "I have had the keeping of Sophie since she was 10, she said. "I taught her to read. I sat up with her through the Scarlatina for 9 nights and my mother went to Bath. She is the only person alive who has ever come into a room and been glad to see me." She picked the pencil up again. "So yes, Your Grace, I like my sister, and that is why I am going to say the next thing which you will not care for." "Say it." "Stop." He waited. "Every hour you spend on me is an hour my mother spends on Sophie," said Constance. "It is a fixed quantity. When you buy my drawings at your godmother's table in front of 22 people, Mamma does not become fond of me. She becomes frightened, and when she is frightened she works on Sophie, and Sophie is 19 and cannot say no to a shopkeeper, let alone to her." The pencil went on moving. "I have been managed for 9 years and I know exactly what it costs and I can carry it. She cannot. So stop, or at least be slower." Piers sat in his chair on his own gravel, and found that he had nothing whatever to say. Lady Winborne settled the whole matter on the 20th of August, by announcing a ball at Oakmoor for the 14th of September. She announced it to him after it had been announced to everybody else, which was her method. "You are 10:30. You have refused 4 unexceptionable young women since Easter, and I have had to be witty about it at 3 separate card tables. On the 14th of September this house will be full, and you will do something. And if I do nothing, then I shall do it for you, and you will like it a great deal less." The county went off like a rocket. 300 cards went out. A woman in Marchford was reported to have ordered from London. And at Wilderley, by the middle of the first week of September, Mrs. Draycott had a dressmaker in the house for 4 days and a milliner for 2, and Miss Sophie Draycott was to have white satin with silver, and everybody in 3 parishes knew it. Piers called there on the 8th, ostensibly about the drawing. 2 things happened. The first was that he was given 4 minutes alone with Sophie in the parlor while her mother went up for a sample, and the girl stood in the middle of the carpet with her hands twisted together and said, in a rush, "Your Grace, may I say something very improper?" "You may say anything you like." "I do not want it." She had gone scarlet again. "Not you, I mean, not, you have been very kind and I am sure you are, but I am 19 and you are, and I am frightened the whole time, and when Mamma talks about the 14th I cannot eat, and there is nobody I can say it to except Constance, and she has troubles enough." Her chin went up in a way that was so exactly her sister's that Piers nearly said so. "Please do not choose me. And please do not tell Mamma I said it, because she will say I am ungrateful, and she will be right, and I shall not sleep." "Miss Sophie," said Piers, "you have my word twice over, and you are not ungrateful. You are the only honest person in this parish, and it will cost you something one day, and I hope I am there when it does." The second thing happened in the hall as he was leaving. There was a letter on the salver, addressed in a clerk's round hand, and he saw it because he had been trained since childhood to read a direction upside down, and had never got out of the habit. Miss Constance Draycott, at Wilderley, near Marchford. And half an hour later, going back for his gloves, he saw Mrs. Draycott at the drawing-room fire with a letter in her hand, feeding it in at the corner, and holding it down with the poker until it had gone. He did not understand it. He turned it over for a week and could make nothing of it, and by then there were 300 people coming on the 14th, and he had a decision to make. He put it to Lady Winborne on the 12th, in her own carriage, in 11 sentences. His godmother heard him out with her hands on the top of her stick, and did not interrupt once, which had never happened before. "Well," she said at last, "it is about time somebody in this county did something interesting." "You approve?" "I approve entirely, and it has nothing to do with anything." She rapped the roof for the coachman. "Piers, understand me before Thursday. You are a duke, and when you do a thing in public the whole room applauds and goes home to its dinner, and nothing whatever happens to you. And she will pay for it," said Lady Winborne. "Whatever you do on Thursday night, she will pay the bill for it, in a house you cannot see into, and you will not be shown the account." Oakmoor had not been lit like that since his father's time. 306 people came. The avenue was full of carriages at 9, and the great room had 1,100 candles in it, and was hot as a kitchen by 10:30. Sophie Draycott came in white satin with silver, and she was the loveliest thing in the county, and she was the color of the satin. Constance came behind her with the shawls. Piers had it from Lady Winborne at the foot of the stairs that the room understood the evening to have 5 possible endings, that the odds in the card room favored a young lady from Marchford with £11,000, and that Miss Sophie Draycott was second favorite and rising. "And when do I do it?" "You open the ball," said his godmother. "You lead out whoever you lead out, and every soul in this house will read it, and they will be right too. That is what these evenings are for. There is nothing else in them at all." He waited until the room was full, and the fiddles were tuning, and then he walked down the middle of it. Mrs. Draycott had Sophie placed 9 feet from the top of the room, which was excellent generalship, and she came forward with her hand already out, and her whole face arranged. "Your Grace—" "Mrs. Draycott." Piers stopped. He had a carrying voice, and he had spent a week deciding to use it. "I am going to say something to you here rather than in your parlor on Monday, because in your parlor it would be said to you alone and would be reported afterwards in whatever shape suited the house." The room began, in the way of rooms, to go quiet in rings. "Since Easter I have been offered 11 young women. I have refused every one of them, and I have done it privately and politely, and it has been no use whatever, because a private refusal is treated in this county as a delay." He looked at her steadily. "So, I refused them all, publicly and once, and I will not be doing it again. The young lady from Marchford, whose mother has been very persevering, the 2 Miss Calendars, and your younger daughter, madam, whom I refuse first and most plainly of the lot." Mrs. Draycott's mouth opened. "Miss Sophie Draycott does not want me," said Piers. "She has had the courage to say so to my face in her own parlor, which is more than anybody else in this room has had, and she asked me not to tell you because she was afraid of you, and I am telling you anyway, in front of 300 people, so that it can never afterwards be denied that she said it." He inclined his head to the girl, who had both hands over her mouth. "Ma'am, you are the most honest person in this house, and I am entirely at your service for the rest of my life." Then he turned and walked to the back of the room, past all of it, to the wall by the 3rd window, where a woman in a gray gown was standing with 2 shawls over her arm. "Miss Draycott, will you dance with me?" Constance looked at him. "No," she said. Somebody quite close by made a small sound. "I'm not dressed for it. I have a work-bag on my wrist, and you have just made me the most looked-at woman in 3 counties without asking me first." Her voice was perfectly level and pitched for him alone. "You have done a fine, brave, expensive thing tonight, Your Grace, and every penny of the expense is going to be charged to me, and you will not see the bill." "I know it." "You do not know it, you cannot." And then Sophie Draycott arrived at a run, with her silver hem in both hands and her face wet, and took the shawls and the work-bag off her sister's arm and said, "Oh, Con, for once in your life, I will carry the things. I have carried nothing in 9 years." Constance Draycott stood quite still for about 4 seconds. Then she put her hand in the Duke of Oakmoor's, and he led her the whole length of that room to the top of the set, and the fiddles struck up, and 306 people watched a woman in a turned gray gown open a ball at Oakmoor. They danced twice. Nobody in the county talked about anything else until Christmas. At about 12:30, he got her out onto the terrace, where there were 50 people, which was as private as anything was going to be that night. "Miss Draycott, do not. I am going to. You are going to do it in a marquee with 50 people 6 feet away, and the fiddles going," said Constance. "And I shall remember it for 40 years, so I would rather you did it properly or not at all." Piers laughed out loud, which the terrace heard and reported. "Very well, Wednesday. I will come to Wilderley on Wednesday morning, and I shall be extremely dull and correct about it." She was quiet a moment. The light out of the long windows was on the side of her face, and he thought, with the particular clarity that comes twice in a life, that he had never wanted anything so much in his. "Piers," she said, it was the first time, and she did not appear to notice she had done it, "listen to me now, because this is the only part that matters, and I shall not say it twice. I am listening. When you come on Wednesday, come to me." She had hold of the terrace balustrade with one hand. "Not to my mother. Do not send in your name and ask for Mrs. Draycott. Do not do the correct thing. Ask for me at the door by my own name, and if they tell you I am not at home, walk round to the kitchen garden, because I shall be in it. Say it back to me. Miss Draycott. Say it back to me." "I am to come to you," said Piers, "and not to your mother." "Yes, I will." And he meant it entirely, at 12:30 on the night of the 14th of September, on his own terrace, with the fiddles going. He rode to Wilderley on the Wednesday morning, in a coat he had had 2 men fussing over since 8 o'clock. And somewhere on the last mile, between the turnpike and the lodge, 38 years of being brought up as the Duke of Oakmoor, came quietly up the road behind him and got in front. Because you do not, if you are that man, ask at the door for an unmarried woman by her own name in front of 2 servants and a boot boy. It would be all over the parish by dinner. It would put her in the wrong. Her mother would hear it from a housemaid instead of from him, and would have a grievance she could dine on for 20 years, and would be, in the plainest sense, entitled to it. The correct thing, the decent thing, the thing his father would have done and his grandfather before him, was to ask for the mother, pay her the compliment of 5 minutes, and then request permission to speak to her daughter. It was courtesy. It was what a gentleman owed a widow. It took him about 90 seconds to talk himself into it, and he has had the rest of his life to think about those 90 seconds. "Mrs. Draycott," said Piers, in the parlor at Wilderley, with his hat in his hand, "I am here to ask your leave to make an offer of marriage to your elder daughter." And Mrs. Draycott sat down slowly in the chair by the window and put her hand over her eyes and said, "Oh, Your Grace! Oh, my dear Your Grace! She has refused you." "She came to me at midnight," said Mrs. Draycott. "In her nightgown, Your Grace, and she was quite calm. She is always calm, and she said, 'Mamma, he will come on Wednesday and I cannot do it, and I cannot say it to his face, and you must say it for me.' And I said, 'My dear, you must say it yourself.' And she said, 'I have been saying things all my life and nobody has ever heard one of them, and this once I will not.'" Piers stood in the middle of the parlor at Wilderley, with his hat in his hand. "I want to hear it from her. She begged me to spare her exactly that." His hostess pressed a handkerchief under each eye in turn. "She said, 'He will be kind about it, and it will be worse. Your Grace, she is 26, and she has been a spinster in her own mind since she was 21, and there is a kind of woman who cannot be lifted out of that, however much one wishes it, and I have wished it, sir. I have wished it every day for 9 years. That is not the woman I have been speaking to since June. No, said Mrs. Draycott. It is not the woman. She is with you. That is exactly what I have been trying to tell you. And then she got up and took a half sheet of paper out of the writing box on the table by the window and put it into his hand, and it was in that small, upright writing he would have known anywhere. I am content as I am. I want nothing altered. He learned in April that it was the bottom line of a household memorandum written 18 months before about whether the still room should be moved, and that Mrs. Draycott had cut the sheet across with a paper knife on the Tuesday evening. Where is she? She went at 7 this morning to my late husband's aunt at Brincode in Montgomeryshire, said Mrs. Draycott. She asked to go. She has been asking since Friday. He rode to Marchford. The chaise had gone at 7:20 with one lady inside and one small trunk, and was by then 40 miles off, and the road to Brincode goes over the top and takes 2 days. He did not follow her. He has been asked about that a great many times since, always kindly, and he always gives the same answer, which is that he was a proud man of 30 who had just been refused for the first time in his life, and that he told himself riding home, in his good coat, with his hat in his hand, that a gentleman who chases a woman across 2 counties, after she has begged to be spared the scene, is doing precisely the thing she begged to be spared. It was courtesy again. It was always courtesy. It cost her the whole of that winter. He wrote once on the 28th of September, 4 lines. Madam, I am told that you are content as you are. I am obliged to you for the information and for the manner in which it reached me. I shall not trouble you again. Oakmoor. And on the 11th of October, at Lady Winbourne's card party, with about 30 people in the room, a woman asked pleasantly after Miss Draycott, who was so much missed at the school. Miss Draycott has made her position perfectly plain, said the Duke of Oakmoor, and I shall not embarrass her again. She tells me she is content as she is. He put down a card. I dare say she is. It is a great convenience to her family that she should be. The room laughed, because a duke had made a joke. Lady Winbourne did not laugh. She looked at her godson for a long moment across the green cloth, and then said, Piers, that will be repeated in this county for 20 years, and one day you are going to have to stand up in this room and say it back. He was told the next morning that it had already reached Marchford. This is what Constance Draycott did that winter, and he did not learn a word of it until April. His letter reached Brincode on the 3rd of October. She read it once, standing in the passage of a stone house in Montgomeryshire, and she worked out in under a minute what must have happened, because there was only one thing that could have. He had gone to the door and asked for her mother. She did not write to him. She has said since, not often, that she sat on the stairs for about a quarter of an hour and thought 2 things. The first was that a man who goes to the mother is a man who will always, at the last moment, do the correct thing rather than the right one. The second was that she had spent 9 years saying things to people who could simply decline to do them, and that she was not going to spend the rest of her life doing it in a larger house. So she stopped thinking about the Duke of Oakmoor altogether, which took her about 3 weeks, and asked herself instead a question he had put to her in the road in June, and that she had refused to answer. What would you do if you had the money in your own hands? And then she thought, I have never once seen my mother's marriage settlement. She wrote to Mr. Hobbs of Ludlow, who had drawn it in the year 2 and had been her father's attorney for 30 years, and was now 79 and mostly retired. His answer came on the 21st of October, and it ran to 4 sides, and it began. Madam, I have been waiting 13 months for this letter. Clause 7 of the settlement made on the marriage of her father and mother in the year 1802 put the mother's own portion, £6,000, into trust, and directed that it be paid over, absolutely and free of any control, to the eldest surviving daughter of the marriage, on her marriage, or on her attaining the age of 25, whichever should first happen. Constance Draycott had turned 25 on the 2nd of September of the previous year. Mr. Hobbs had written to the trustee on that day. He had written again on the 11th of October following. He had had no answer to either, and being an old man in a small way of business, and the trustee being the lady of the house and the beneficiary living under her roof and never once applying, he had let it lie and had not slept well since. Constance walked 7 miles to the coach on the 23rd of October with her father's aunt's blessing and 11 shillings, and was in Mr. Hobbs's office in Ludlow the following afternoon. She signed everything he put in front of her. He demanded an account of the trustee on the 26th. There was no answer. He demanded it again in November by 2 separate hands. There was no answer. On the 9th of January, a petition was filed in the Court of Chancery in the name of Constance Draycott, spinster, praying an account of the trust fund created by Clause 7, payment of what was due, and the removal of the trustee. Mr. Hobbs took no fee. He said that he had drawn the clause, and that a man is answerable for what he draws. She did not sit at Brincode and wait for it. On the 9th of January, the same day the petition was filed, Miss C. Draycott took a place at a school for girls in Shrewsbury at £28 a year and her board, teaching drawing, arithmetic, and the use of the globes, and she kept it for 7 months, and was, by all accounts, extremely good at it. Lady Winbourne found her there in February and offered her a carriage, £100, and a home. She had a note back within the week. Madam, I am very grateful, and I mean that, and I am not going to take any of it. If I win, I want it to have been mine. If I lose, I want to know that I did it on £28 a year. C. Draycott. And on the 14th of April, at 3 in the afternoon, a hired gig came up the avenue at Oakmoor with a girl of 20 in it, driving herself, alone, having driven 19 miles. Sophie Draycott came into the library at Oakmoor with her bonnet in her hand, and mud to the knee of her gown, and did not sit down. There was no midnight, she said. I beg your pardon. On the Tuesday night before you came, Mamma told you Constance came down to her at midnight in her nightgown and begged her to refuse you. Sophie's voice was going up and she held on to it. There was no midnight. I was awake. Our rooms are next door and the boards go and I hear everything. And Constance went up at 10:30 with a candle and she did not come down again. And in the morning she was told at breakfast that she was going to Brincode at 7 and there was a chaise at the door. She had 11 minutes to pack, Your Grace. I helped her do it. Piers put his hand on the back of a chair. She never refused me. She was never asked. She did not know you had come to the house until the Sunday after, when the housemaid told her in a letter. Sophie was crying now and taking no notice of it. And your letter came to Brincode, and she has never told me what was in it, and she will not. And after that she stopped writing about you at all. The paper, said Piers, the half-sheet, I am content as I am. It is out of the still-room memorandum, from the year before last. I have the rest of the sheet in my pocket, said Sophie, and the cut across the top matches, and I have brought it, and there are other things, and I want you to look at them, and then I want to be sick. She put them on the library table one at a time. The bottom 2/3 of a half-sheet of household memoranda, dated the March before last, with a knife cut across the head of it, and the sentence above the cut running, As to the still room, I would leave it where it is. I am content as I am. I want nothing altered. 2 letters from Mr. Hobbs, attorney, of Ludlow, to Mrs. Draycott of Wilderley, dated the 2nd of September of the year before last and the 11th of October following, each requiring her, as trustee under Clause 7, to state the position of the fund, and to pay it over to Miss Constance Draycott, who had attained the age of 25. Both opened, neither answered. And a household account book, in Constance's own writing for 9 years, in which the money coming in each quarter had been entered by her without comment. The 800 a year of the jointure, and beside it, quarter after quarter, a second line from Mamma, on account of 150, or 200, or in 1 year 320. She thought Mamma was selling out of something of her own, said Sophie. She wrote it down for 9 years and never once knew what it was, because she was never told there was anything to know. Piers turned the pages. The harp, 80 guineas. The Italian master, the drawing master, the dancing master. The carriage, 4 gowns in the June before last and 6 in the September. The white satin with silver, £41 10. It was mine, Sophie said, all of it. It was hers, and it was spent on me, and I wore it, and I danced in it, and I stood in the light in it while she stood at the back holding my shawls, and I did not know, and that is no good at all, your grace, because I ought to have asked. I was 15. Then I was 16. Then I was 19. She wiped her face with the flat of her hand like a boy. Nobody in that house ever asked her one question in 9 years, and I lived in the next room. Piers said after a while, I said a thing about your sister in October, at my godmother's card table, in front of 30 people. I know what you said, said Sophie. It reached Shrewsbury in November. A girl at the school had it from her aunt. Does she know I said it? Yes. He went to Shrewsbury on the 16th of April. He was not admitted. He stood in the street outside a girls' school for an hour and 20 minutes like a fool, and a maid came down at last with 4 lines on a piece of copy paper. Your Grace, no. Not now and not by you. There is a suit in the Court of Chancery with my name at the top of it, and if you come into this street again somebody will say that the Duke of Oakmoor got it for me, and they will go on saying it after I am dead. When it is over I will hear anything you like. C.D. He kept that paper in a pocket book for the rest of his life, and it was in it when he died. So he did the only thing left, which was nothing, for 7 weeks, and he has always said it was the hardest work he ever did. He did not write to the master's office. He did not speak to the 2 men he knew in Lincoln's Inn. He did not pay a penny towards Mr. Hobbs, who would not have taken it. He went to Wilderley once in May, and said to Mrs. Draycott, in her own parlor, with Sophie standing by the door, exactly 11 sentences, of which the last was, I shall be at my godmother's on the 3rd of June, madam, and so will the county, and I intend to say the whole of it out loud. Sophie left Wilderley in the same week, and went to Lady Winbourne, who had been waiting for her to ask since February. The report came out of the master's office at the end of May, and it was public, and by the 2nd week, the whole of 2 counties had it. The trust under Clause 7 had been wholly wasted. £6,000, received by the trustee in the year 2, had been spent by her, in the years since her husband's death, upon the maintenance of the household and the education, dress and establishment of her younger daughter. There was nothing left of it. The trustee had been required to pay it over on the 2nd of September of the year before last, and had not done so, and had not answered her attorney. The trustee was removed. The sum of £6,000, with interest, making 6,840, was ordered to be made good out of her own property, which meant the lease of Wilderley, the carriage, the plate, and the greater part of her income for the rest of her life. an annuity of 200 being reserved to her, which Constance did not oppose, and which Mr. Hobbs said afterwards she had directed him not to oppose before the report was even written. And on the 28th of May, £6,840 was ordered paid into the name of Constance Draycott, spinster, of Shrewsbury, absolutely and free of any control. Lady Winbourne's ball was on the 3rd of June, which was a year and a day since a woman in a grey stuff gown had stood at the back of the morning room at Oakmoor with an armful of shawls, and been told not to speak. His godmother sent for him on the 1st. "She has accepted," said Lady Winbourne. Piers had to sit down. "She has written to me herself," the old woman went on, turning the note over in her fingers. "She is coming in her own hired chaise from Shrewsbury, and she is paying for it, and she asks whether the small room off the hall may be kept locked, because she does not choose to be got at before she comes in." Lady Winbourne looked up. "And there is a postscript, and I am going to read it to you once, and then I am going to burn it, because if you keep it you will look at it too often." "Read it." "I am not coming to be looked at, and I am not coming to be forgiven. I am coming because a thing was said about me in that room, and I intend to be standing in it when it is unsaid. She came at 10 o'clock in a hired chaise from Shrewsbury, and she came in alone. She was wearing a plain dark green silk with no trimming and no jewels of any description, and Piers learned afterwards that she had bought it in March out of her £28 a year, for £4 too, at a time when she did not know whether she would have a shilling in June, and that she had chosen it because it would do for a schoolmistress afterwards. The room did what rooms do. It went quiet in rings, from the door outward, and there were about 200 people in it, and a good number of them had been in the card room on the 11th of October. Lady Winbourne took her arm and walked her the length of the floor, and did not say one word, which from Lady Winbourne was an oration. Piers had the fiddle stopped. "On the 11th of October in this room," he said, "somebody asked me pleasantly after Miss Draycott, and I answered. I am going to say what I said exactly, because a great many of you have been repeating it since November, and it may as well be right." He waited until it was entirely still. "I said, Miss Draycott has made her position perfectly plain, and I shall not embarrass her again. She tells me she is content as she is. I dare say she is. It is a great convenience to her family that she should be." Somebody, somewhere at the back, made a sound. "That was said by me, in this house, at that table, about a woman who had never in her life told me she was content, who had never refused me, who had never been asked, and who had been put into a chaise at 7 in the morning, with 11 minutes to pack in order that she should not be able to contradict a lie told to me in a parlor which I believed, because it was told to me by a lady in her own drawing-room, and because I had gone to the mother instead of to the daughter, which is what I was asked not to do, and which I did anyway, because it was correct." He put his hands behind his back. "I am going to tell this room what she did afterwards, and then I have done. She was at Brinkode in Montgomeryshire with no money. She wrote to an attorney at Ludlow and asked to see her own mother's marriage settlement, which no one had ever shown her. She walked 7 miles to the coach with 11 shillings in her purse. On the 9th of January, she filed a petition in the Court of Chancery in her own name, at her own charge, against her own mother, which is the hardest paper any woman in this county has ever signed. And on the same day, so that she should not have to wait about being pitied, she took a place at a school in Shrewsbury at £28 a year, and taught drawing and arithmetic for 7 months, and by all accounts taught them extremely well. In February, my godmother offered her a carriage, £100 and a home, and she sent back 3 lines refusing all of it, because she wished it to be hers. On the 28th of May, the court ordered £6,840 paid into her name, absolutely and free of any control. She got that with her own 2 hands and 11 shillings, and there is not a man in this room with 11,000 acres who could have done it. And I know, because I have 11,000 acres and I could not. He turned. In September, in my own house, I said that I refused them all. I meant it, and I mean it now, and I shall go on meaning it. But I never said the rest of the sentence, and I should have said it that night on the terrace when I was asked to do it properly. He crossed the floor. "Miss Draycott, will you marry me?" 200 people held their breath, and Constance Draycott looked up at him with her chin absolutely level. "No," she said. There was a noise in that room, like a wave going out. "Not here." She had not raised her voice at all. "I have been an exhibit in a room once, Your Grace, and once was enough, and I have just been told my own history out loud by a man in front of 200 people, and I would rather the next part of it were nobody's but mine." A pause. "Ask me tomorrow, in the road between this house and Marchford at 9 in the morning, with nobody watching and no fiddles." "I will be there at 8, said Piers. "You will be early and you will be uncomfortable and it will do you good." And then Constance did the thing that the county talked about for 30 years, which was to hand her own shawl to her sister, who was standing 4 feet away with her hands over her mouth, and say, "Sophie, hold that. You said you would." Then she put her hand on the Duke of Oakmoor's arm. "You may take me in to supper," she said, "and you may do it slowly." He was in the road at 10 minutes past 8 the next morning, and it was fine, and there was a lark going up out of the barley, and he walked his horse up and down for 3/4 of an hour. She came round the bend at 9 exactly, on foot, in the grey gown, because she said afterwards that the green one was for rooms. They were married in September, at Wilderley Church. Under the roof her drawings had paid for, with Sophie and Lady Winbourne and Mr. Hobbs, who came from Ludlow at 80, and would not sit down at the back. The £6,840 stayed in her name. She raised it once in the road on the 4th of June before she gave him her answer, and he said, "Of course it does," and she said, "You did not even hesitate," and he said, "No," and that was the whole of the negotiation. She spent £71 of it that first autumn at a bookseller's in Shrewsbury, buying back 11 lots of her father's library, which had gone in one lot for £62 9 years before. The Evelyn was still there. It had gone up to 11 shillings. Her mother lives at Bath on 200 a year with her own sister and a maid. Constance went to Wilderley once in July before the wedding and sat with her for half an hour, and said 3 things, and came away. And she writes at Christmas and at Easter, and that is the whole of it, and she has never once pretended it is anything else. "I do not intend to mend it," she says, "when anybody is fool enough to raise it. I intend to be civil. Civil is a great deal cheaper than pretending, and it wears better." Sophie goes twice a year, and Constance has never said one word to her about going, except to ask whether she wants the carriage. Sophie lived at Oakmoor for a year and married a young man from beyond Marchford who breeds horses and laughs at everything, and she is extremely happy, and she still cannot play the harp, and never could. The harp was sold with the plate and the carriage under the master's order, and her sister did not buy it back, and Sophie has said publicly that it was the greatest kindness anybody ever did her. The 4 engravings of Wilderley Church were reissued in the spring with after a drawing by Miss C. Draycott under them, at the expense of the Duke of Oakmoor, who bought 200 of them, and has been giving them away ever since to anybody who stands still. The west front drawing hangs in the Oakmoor Library. It is signed in the corner, small, in pencil, C. Draycott. He has been asked 11 times whether he means to have it relettered now that she is a duchess, and he has said no 11 times. She keeps the Oakmoor accounts, which the steward resisted for a fortnight and now cannot manage without. She draws 2 mornings a week and will not be interrupted. She is not a soft woman and never was, and Oakmoor is a warmer house than it has been in 60 years, and both of those things are true at once, and nobody there finds it strange. And there is a harp in the small drawing room, a new one, bought by her out of her own money in the 2nd year, that nobody in that house plays well. They get it out at Christmas. Sophie makes a noise on it and everybody suffers, and Constance sits beside her on the stool with the spare gut in her workbag, exactly as she has done since she was 14. And when the room laughs, the Duke of Oakmoor says, from the fire, in a voice of enormous gravity, that nobody is to mind the Duchess. She is only there to turn the pages. And she looks up at him down the length of the room, every single year, and lets him have it.